when I think about Asian American artists, like I don't I don't know if who's up next is like, I don't know if it's even like a feasible like label or thing for me to consider, because like I look at someone like Dumbfounded, who's
Hmm.
been at it for years, and I
Years,
feel
yeah.
like he's done everything well. He's even transitioned from doing battle rap into making songs. That transition is hard for a lot of battle rappers,
Yep,
but he
yep.
was still able to do that, and because I see how even Breezy Lovejoy, who's now Anderson Paak, I see
Hmm.
his like crazy rise to the top, and I just feel like I don't know. Maybe it's not a conversation for this kind of forum. Maybe it is, but like I still think there's this idea of like foreignness that at least for a male, I'll speak from a male's perspective. I feel like in American pop culture or the general culture, I think there is like a bit of like what's the word? Acceptance is not the right word, but I feel like there is more familiarity with like an Asian female, um, and seeing that manifest into an artist like artist platform. I feel like, I don't know, it's like a psychology and anthropology I'm talking about right now, which I don't quite understand, but it's
Hmm.
something I've just been kind of noticing. Like, why is someone like Dumbfounded, maybe because he is a little older, but I feel like he's fresh, and like he knows what's happening in the culture. Like I don't see anything. I don't see why he's not bigger than Anderson Paak. Like I just don't understand. But then you can have
Especially once they
people,
came up together. They came up
yeah,
together.
exactly. But then you have foreign born people, or just not born in the US, but you have someone like Rich Brian able to just, you know, take take it to the top. And it was a different time, like media was different. He had a bunch of money to be able to invest into that video, the first push. Like how he started compared to Dumbfounded, it's different, and the times are different.
Hmm.
But it's just interesting, like in some ways I do agree with Albert that I'm able to express myself for who I am, but I don't know if I don't know if it's mm, doing it in the US market. It's just still not the same, like compared to if I went to
Hmm.
Korea. In Korea, I'm seen as an artist, I'm seen as someone with a legit voice, someone with legitimate art, and I don't have
Hmm.
to be tokenized in order to be accepted or palatable to the general audience. I am just who I am.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
single nuance about me is accepted in a market outside of America. But in America, I have to package myself in such a specific way to be palatable to to whoever the gatekeepers are.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And that sort of is going into another thing that I want to talk about. It's a very hard issue to talk about, but obviously, with this pandemic being what it is and what it sort of stems from, there's a lot of racism that has decided to show its crazy lately. And a lot of stuff that's been sort of always there, but now is on an even more ridiculous scale, specifically since this is the conversation for Asians and Asian Americans. Um, do you think, and I'm going to start with the artists on this one, do you think that there's even a desire to bring music to the West because of how crazy it is here, how stigmatized now Asian Americans have become, or anyone who's Asian identifying. Um, so yeah, I want to start. I think since you were already talking about it, Uzo, we'll start with you. Sort of, do you think that this sort of makes it harder for people to want to even attempt to make waves here?
um in 2020, nah, I just feel like it's a great time for a content creator. If you have fresh ideas and you're willing to put it out there in the digital economy, like I don't see any reason for you to not find a niche of
Hmm.
an audience in America. Like, because, for all of us who've been around music, it's not, yeah, you want to eventually get to the masses, and it happens in a snowball effect. But, if you're an artist starting out or you want to solicit a new um, fan base, I mean, you got to go through the niches or the niche, however you pronounce it. Like, you just
Hmm.
got to, and if you do that, we have so many platforms available like TikTok. It's amazing. Or Triller. Like, the whole algorithm feeds you new content. It doesn't matter what kind of clout you have. As long as people are hitting the like button, it gets pushed. You know, like TikTok is amazing. I personally, as kind of like a old school hipster, like, you know, if somebody does a trend, I automatically don't like it. I don't know. It's just kind of like, but the great thing about TikTok is if someone's hopping on it, everyone's just going to hop on it and they don't bat an eyelash. It just, you push through, you funnel through so many songs. And I think it's a great platform that honestly, like for someone in Korea, they can leverage just their friends in their community and like bump up the numbers in TikTok and then get it exposed to more audiences, you know? Like I don't, I'm more on the, I err on the side of, I don't think there are less and less excuses to be able to put content out there in 2020, you know, like there are ways to do it. It's not easy, but I think there are a lot more resources that have become available, even to someone like me. You know, I'm discovering so many things. So I don't know. I don't think, oh, and one more thing, like the biggest hurdle for Korean artists is their pronunciation. Like we're going to laugh at them if like when Crush did that song and he was like speaking some English, like he needed to sharpen that up. Cause I was, as a Korean American who has a lot of grace and understand that he can't pronounce some of the R's, like, you know, I love the musicality of what he did, but that's something for the general American audience. If they hear you saying squirrel instead of squirrel, like they're gonna laugh at you and look at you kind of funny, you know, for someone who's not exposed to the Korean music, you know, because you're talking about, you want to get maybe the least common denominator, perhaps, if that's who you eventually want to reach, you know. A Korean artist can always reach the Hallyu fans, can always reach the Korean music listening fan, you know.
Yeah. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that, Albert?
Yeah, to answer your question about, you know, whether people are still trying to break out in the West, and particularly the US, I think that the US is still, all things said, a cultural hub for music. I work closely with a lot of artists in Singapore and people that know like that Southeast Asia really well. And in terms of music culture, it's really popping off there. It's a good kind of, it's a hotbed for like up and comers. People are hungry for new music, but still the desire that everyone has is to break out in America, especially as an Asian artist, because not a lot of us have done it. And it's kind of like this white whale. And it is true that if you become big in the US, just because the US has been kind of the leading indicator for a lot of music trends, not all of them, but a lot of them, it just makes it so that other nations will take notice once you pop off in the United States. So I know that especially with COVID, there is a lot of xenophobia with I think even with the success of K-pop and like the mainstream success of like Parasite and Crazy Rich Asians, right? It's going to bring some xenophobia because there are going to be people that are saying, oh, this Asian culture is starting to invade my own US culture in a sense, right? There is that, but I think on the plus side, there's more acceptance of Asians in the media right now than there has been my entire life. And so it's one of those things where it's always going to be tough, at least for the time being, for an Asian American artist to break out in any sort of mainstream music scene. But I think it's more possible and it's easier now. One, because of the increased representation in media, and two, because genres in general are becoming more blended and mixed, right? That you can separate yourself from everybody else by combining a little bit of folk and a little bit of hip hop and a little bit of electronic to create something that people want to hear that's never been done before. And if that's the case, they don't really care what you look like, right? Again, it's not perfect. It's gonna get better, I hope. But I think it's better right now than it has been in the past, especially for Asian artists.
Okay. Do you, Annie, hear, and I don't know if you would hear anything like this, but do you get the impression that artists are still interested in coming to the States, are still interested in, you know, actually physically, you know, making their presence known here because of some of the harder, you know, racial implications?
I I only can speak as a artist who is living in Korea right now, because I think most of them are interested in going overseas whatsoever, because it's overseas and like you want to see the world, and ultimately you want to put your music out there to see if that music affects others. So whether it's America or any other country, I think people still want to go there for sure. But I think COVID, but the thing is, like, if you're stuck in Korea and majority of the people are Koreans who are not other races, you are still living in a bubble. So you don't really feel that there are xenophobia inside Korea when you live here. I mean, there must be, but still we can't physically like feel it every day. You know what I mean? So the only, indication to have, to find out there's some sort of xenophobia happening is by like watching news online. But I don't think a lot of artists do that. And I'm possibly the only one who was like constantly watching news on YouTube, like, because I work part-time translation interpretation for media outlets from overseas, so that's my job to do so. So I watch not only just news, I watch like Seth Meyers, Conan, or whatever type of late night talk shows that I can find, and I'm trying to connect with what's happening in the world. So I'm one of the news source to the Korean artists, like, oh, this is happening in the States, and like they now know that. So I think so it's very hard for Korean artists to have a grasp of what's going on overseas other than in Korea. In that sense, if you are still trying to go overseas, I think it's very important for all the artists to understand that the culture is very, very different. And most of like, if you're more successful, there's a higher possibility that you don't care about their culture, And I actually felt that very strongly when I was in South by Southwest in 2016, because I already knew that if we nail this show, we are able to meet a bunch of fans and like possibly sell a lot of merch, which, make make more, income. And we were the only ones who brought merch at that show. And I thought that was very weird, but that already says that a lot of Korean artists who actually want to go there doesn't really have enough information about the culture. And I think it's very important to learn that as much as possible.
Okay. Sort of from the perspective of our journalists here, there have been a lot of, things said in the comments. And specifically, one thing I wanted to talk about was, in the direction that Hallyu was going, the things that people see, they see maybe three artists. They see BTS, they see Blackpink, they might see GOT7, they might see Twice. But do you think, and I guess I'll start with Ashley, do you think that with this sort of putting a halt to a lot of the lesser known artists from lesser known labels or even indie artists, does this really put a cap on what an audience in the United States is going to want to, bring over here? Have we peaked at BTS and Blackpink, essentially?
Oh God, no. we've not peaked. What we are hitting now is the desire to know and see more, no matter what it is, be it us looking at sports here in America, WWE fans, soccer or football, because soccer is only called that here, football fans and whatnot. There are age demographics, there's consumption differences amongst people who have been invested in something for a long time. Eventually their tastes evolve too. So for those who are fresh on the bandwagon, yeah, they're gonna look at, oh my God, I got into this in 2012. You could not keep Big Bang in 21 out of my mouth at the time. But that's because that's the way I came in. So now that we don't get to have as much in-person access to that, where now you got to cough up some dough and things are going back to how it used to be, where you really need to just go online and find artists. I think this is a very exciting time for the indie artist. I think this is an exciting time for smaller labels. You're going to find more diversity. If me as I split my homes in 2 different continents, if I'm able to get my music on a random playlist and I'm looking at Shazam stuff that says people are listening in South Africa or in Germany and whatnot, the same is happening for other independent artists as well. So I think this is a very exciting time. 88 Rising had a very good online festival. It was some things that were pre-recorded, but that worked. There's another festival getting ready to come up that has a lot of names on it. Miyavi is going to be a part of that. He is nowhere near small. He's nowhere near small, and he is not a part of the Korean artist scene, although it is through his bloodline. But seeing this mix of mainstream and other artists coming together, it's an opportunity for all hands on deck to grab whatever they can. Identity is going to be so cool to see. I really hope people check it out. But yeah, I don't think there's an apex we've hit. We've hit this wave's crest. We're getting ready to roll down and start rolling into something else.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Tamar?
Whenever everybody asks me, like, where are we in the wave, we're at a plateau right now because things are kind of leveling off. You know, the fans who are into K-pop are into K-pop. People who are into films are from Korea are into films from Korea. People who look towards the R&B and hip-hop scene in Korea are pretty familiar with it. I think that we're kind of at a place where there's definitely room for growth, and hopefully there will be more growth. But I think I agree with Ashley that, you know, like, everything right now is online. So many people are sitting at their computers way longer than they have generally. So I think more people are going to be engaging with content that maybe they wouldn't have ever come across. I know I, like, not even for music, but like, I have written a list of all the movies and TV shows that I never really thought I would make time for, and I'm just, you know, watching them. And I think that people are doing that too for music. You know, everyone's talking about TikTok now, but everyone's talking about TikTok because they're sitting at their houses watching TikTok. So I think this is a good opportunity for more people to kind of, if they're able to, get their content out there. I think there's a lot of, you know, rough patches, and I think from the industry, from the journalism industry side of things like K-pop just are seen as too, you know, poppy. You know, the people who love it are the people who love Lady Gaga, Carly Rae Jepsen, like those people who are already writing about it, who are already covering it. But nobody's really looking to introduce anyone other than, like, you know, Season got some coverage last year. People didn't really care about Hyaku's tour. Like, people are still really reluctant. They're just like, oh, K-pop is what it is, and we don't really care. Like, we have our own music scene. And our music scene is pretty stagnant in a lot of ways. You know, we see the same artists still topping charts after almost, you know, a decade in their work. We see a lot of rising stars like, yay, Doja Cat, but it's still the same genres. You know, hip hop is dominating, and that's wonderful. But it's like pretty much like who was it? You know, it was Doja Cat and Nicki and Beyonce, and like it's the same people we're having the conversations about who we were talking about 5 years ago. So people are kind of like, I don't know. I think the American industry wishes it was a lot more open than it actually is, and I think that that's something that Corona might kind of change, because we don't have an industry anymore temporarily. Hopefully we have it soon. But I think I've read a lot of articles about people, you know, looking towards Korea just to see what they're doing for concerts, online concerts, because nobody here is doing it on that scale. And like SM Entertainment's Beyond Live series has easily brought in over 200,000 audiences. Like, I think it's about 75,000 each week for the past 4 weeks, racking up millions of dollars. And people in the industry here are kind of just like, I think even less than the music, are kind of looking, what's going on in the industry? How is our industry not innovating? Our industry is so like, I really think our industry is stagnant and behind on the times, and the musical scenes around the world are just, you know, swishing right past us. And that's why things like 88 Rising are really resonating, is because we've like halted in our glory days of Hollywood. Okay, sorry, I went on a
Yeah.
really long rant.
It's okay. It's all right. Sarah, do you think that there is more interest beyond, BTS, Blackpink, Monsta X, GOT7?
Absolutely. Sometimes I say no, because it's just BTS, Blackpink, like the main hitters right now. They're still so popular. People are still talking about them, especially now, like with Blackpink, saying that they're going to have their comeback finally after like 18,000 years. They're definitely on the lips of everybody. However, like Ashley and pretty much everyone else has said already, since we're indoors now, we're kind of expanding our horizons. We're getting ourselves into new territory. I know, like with, for example, Eric Nam on his podcast will mention a few artists that he's into, and I noticed, like in the comments, because I'm one of those weird people that love reading the comments and things, they'll say, "Oh, I've never heard of this person. Let me check it out." And I'm sure we all know about that YouTube black hole. That video will lead to another video to lead to another video, which will kind of broaden people's minds about what is out there. In addition to that, a lot of the artists and their companies are realizing that now is kind of the opportune time to be on social media, not just the stuff that like old fogies like myself are on, like Instagram, but TikTok as well. But I've noticed kind of an uptick in people, different artists that will do like dance covers, or they'll sing a song that may not even have anything to do with K-pop, just to kind of get themselves out there, because y'all know with SEO, you type in like, okay, this person is doing a large name cover. Someone who may not even be into K-pop will hear it, and it's like, oh wow, I really like how they did this, so let me look into some of their original music. So I do think that now is kind of that pivotal moment where if you're going to kind of put yourself out there and try to garner more fans, now might be the best time,
Okay. I have one more question that I'm really interested to get people's opinions on, and it was something that Christian actually wrote about in the comments that I was considering. We mentioned the Live Beyond, and Christian even mentioned that there should be, and it's been said a lot during the panel, that this is the opportune time for artists to sort of now branch out on their own and put their music on SoundCloud and everything like that. And with the live series, that brings in different ideas for what can happen in the future for artists. So the question is, do you think that the time for the big label in Korea is almost obsolete? And do you think that things like the in-person festivals like KCON, like South by Southwest, are going to become less viable venues? And I guess who should I ask first? Let's ask Ashley first.
Dang on it. Okay. No, it's never going to be a time where the major labels diminish. If anything, they're going to evolve, and we've been watching evolution in some of them for a while. And I love to go back to the examples of JYP Entertainment, the efforts that they are making. And when I say they, I'm not speaking of JYP the person, but as the conglomerate. I like the efforts that they made, and in the presentation that they made about what they intend to do for the future for their artists, for their exposure and whatnot. I've been keeping up heavily with what's going on with Big Hit, because they're acquiring a lot of properties here domestically, not property in terms of physical structure, but digital space. They're working on something. I don't know what it is. So no, I don't think there's going to be a time where the big boys step down. If anything, the big boys will shift, but there will always be some big boy in place.
What are your thoughts, Tamar?
I think Annie might be able to answer this better than me because she actually lives in Korea, but I don't think so, because Korea just generally is really into like conglomerates, like Ashley said, like Chibble or Thing, and pretty much the entertainment companies operate the same way. Like SM has a lot of, quote unquote indie artists under their labels, but they have so many sub labels that people don't know. Like I found out a few months ago that XXX, if people are familiar with.
Yeah, those are my boys.
They're under a company that is funded by SM Entertainment. And that's like, okay. I mean, the company is a separate company, but they're still not like it's, you know, a subsidiary. So I think that we're going to see way more subsidiaries getting their own, you know, like actual identities, but they're still, I think, going to be under the same umbrella. So I don't really think that's going to go away just because like that's how things run.
Yeah.
Uzuhan just mentioned in the comments, the big boys in Korea will always be backed by the government, and that it kind of just seems that that's kind of how it's going to be until, you know, I don't know, Korea is not Korea anymore. I don't know.
Well, since you did ask Annie, I do want to get your thoughts on this, Sarah, but to speak to Annie's part, because I mean, like I said, she's real ride or die for indie. Obviously, she's an indie artist, but you don't understand how ride or die Annie is for the artists out there that are in the indie scene. Do you think that there will ever be a time where, do you think that there will ever be room for sort of the lesser known artists and the bigger artists who coexist on equal footing? Do you think this might be the time for that to happen?
I don't think that'll happen very, very soon, but it already, I mean, there are certain bands that have been coexisting with the big three or big four. Mm-hmm. That because if they always have the TV platform that I mentioned before, mm-hmm. if you are somewhere in like a platform like Na 혼자 산다, those are the like good TV platforms for indie artists to jump to the major in Korea, and that always has been like that since, I don't know, like 20, 30 years ago. So there are always examples like that. I'm just pointing out that those people have entertainment qualities and they are like born funny, you know, mm-hmm. to be on camera. But I don't think there is enough room for other indie artists, like not so much fun, but doing like more serious music, would go on easily on TV. I don't think that's going to happen very, very soon. But I think if right now the industry, like the TV industry itself, is trying to jump into the multi-channel media thing. So, and more people are not actually watching TV. They're watching their TV on their phones. So in that sense, it's slightly shifting towards internet mm-hmm. rather than actual TV. But yeah, to answer your question, not soon.
Okay.
I have a question for Annie. If
mm-hmm.
it'll be a quick question, but Annie, do you see like labels? Well, I don't know if Magic Strawberry Sound is considered. They're an indie label, but like, would you consider them to be indie? Like,
that's a very hard question because technically YG or SM are indie. You know, do you know what I mean? Like they aren't really Universal, they're not Sony, so technically they are indie, but they got a lot of like outside investments and they are conglomerates. And I think Magic Strawberry is also have a lot of huge investments to put into that company. And the way they work is very strange because to me it's strange, not strange to them. The Korean indie industry is like, the industry is very small, but there's a little industry. It almost works exactly like the big three. So if you are like an up and coming artist who are having a lot of traction, they are going to have managers, they're going to have whatever, like the almost very similar to what the K-pop idols have. So everybody's going to do the work for you. And like, you just have to be pretty on camera, and that kind of stuff always happens. So yeah, it's very, very weird, but yeah. And sometimes, you know, I'd say maybe some like I mentioned before, the indie, very poppy, very sweet kind of indie music is a little like it has a very small room, but they're very popular, like yeah. And people might not know, but a lot of them actually don't. Maybe some of them, but in various cases, they don't really actually make their own music at sometimes. So I don't think, in a sense, that indie is those type of like, I mean, there are many artists who make their own music, but they're very much controlled under like producers and what the company wants them to be. So yeah.
We're not talking about like the kids who are out every weekend hustling in Hongdae. Okay, so for my last question, I did sort of touch on it a little bit, and I do want to sort of go back to Sarah and Albert and Uzu with things like South by Southwest and with KCON. Do you think those are, I mean, if you talk about big three in terms of the festival circuit in this sort of way, you know, those are part of that echelon. Do you think that being in close quarters, especially now with this whole urge of, you know, social distancing, do you think that the time for that has sort of come to an end? Do you think that that's still something that artists are vying to be a part of, the KCONs and the South by Southwest? What do you think, Sarah?
As far as artists, I really don't know. I can't speak for them too much, but definitely on the fan side, there's always going to be a market for that. I know that now we know that the digital concerts and conventions are happening, and it is possible people will attend. However, fans are always going to crave that face-to-face interaction with their idols. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. Of course, it'll be, you know, some time before it probably gets back to the way it was prior to COVID-19. But if there's a chance that a fan can like get within, you know, a high five distance, even with everything that has happened, there are going to be people that are willing to pay. Now, the thing that I'm actually curious about is how this will affect money, you know, financially. I'm sure companies know, you know, thinking the same way that I'm thinking, that people will still pay for this. But now I'm wondering if that price will increase, because if not, then they can just throw a virtual festival, which may not have as many expenses as a physical festival or convention will have, but they will still, you know, get a lot of money back. So that's what I'm interested about. But I don't think festivals or conventions are going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay, Albert, I know you've wanted a couple times to come to South by. Well, I mean, I sort of like wanted to peer pressure you to come, but that's not the point. Wanted to do South by and, you know, things like KCON, which, you know, our boy Late has done like the last 4 years. Do you think that there's still a place for that in this era where people just don't want to be close to people?
Well, yes. I think when you say people don't want to be close to people right now, it's solely because of the fact that it's a health issue. But I think the moment that there's some sort of, you know, if there's vaccine, if they find some way to hold concerts, I saw an article about they were going to start making like festival suits that basically you're like an astronaut and everything's covered up so you can still attend these festivals. If there's some way to overcome the health issues, you know, there's never going to be a decreased demand for people to go see live shows. And I don't think there's ever going to be decreased demand for the most part for artists to want to perform, because at least for me, and I'm sure the other artists can speak to this, there are two joys in the musical process. There's the process of actually creating what you want to create, right? Putting it on paper, putting it into a song. And then there's the process of connecting with other people. And those to me hold about equal weight in the process, and they're so important. And I don't think it's going to happen soon, the way things are going, right? It's not going to go back to normal. But I think, you know, artists are creative. They're not just creative in like the music way, but they're creative in how to market themselves. And there is an entire industry that is trying to make money off of this. I think there's going to be a way to continue to connect with fans. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be as good or as widely adopted as it was before, but hopefully it will hold us in place until we're able to have shows again. And once that happens, I think it'll go back to normal. And I hope that it'll go back to normal.
Okay. What's your thoughts on that, Uzu?
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. I think, I don't know. I mean, I just think if someone was like, hey, come to my festival, you know, in July, I'll be like, oh yeah, how much you, I don't know if there's a price. I'm willing to, I don't know, it's tough, you know?
Yeah.
So I really think, I think Christian in the comments, he said like AR and virtual reality is like the next move. I totally agree. Like if Zoom meetings and iPhone quality is all we can do in 2020, like that's sad, you know, like we have to move to VR and AR. Like that's where the future is moving. That's where all these Apple products, technology is moving, you know. It's just, we haven't had a need. So now there's a growing need, and these like virtual experiences, just like what's his name? Travis Scott doing it on Fortnite.
Oh yeah, that's
amazing.
right.
That was so brilliant. Like all these kids who never would have really listened to his stuff, you know, like now they got a whole set list and his numbers are all the way up. Like all my nephews and nieces, you know, they were reciting Sicko Mode line by line, you know? Like it's just weird, but stuff like that, you know, like that's also very expensive to partner, I'm sure, with Fortnite, but you know, I'm very interested to see like what technology, you know, even as simple as streaming 4K, you know, we're still on like 720, you know, like
we don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, you know, so like just there's going to be a lot of technology that's going to come through, and I'm very interested in seeing that. The creation, artists, creative people, everyone's always going to create. People want to consume, want to be inspired, want to escape, you know, that's always going to happen. But, you know, in terms of festivals, I don't know. I'm not too worried about that. I'm just trying to live, you know.
That's real. That's real. Yes. See, exactly. And we can only do that if we wash our hands and stop going to the beach. But anyway,
that's right.
We have some time, about 10 minutes, for any questions that people have. I know that people sent in questions. Miss Ashley, is that something that you have for us?
Sure thing. So let's go ahead and get into these questions. Sai, I'll read it. You can pick who you want to respond to it, or you can free for all it.
Okay.
So we have one question that says, my question for the panelists is, what is your opinion on fan engagement during the pandemic? Fan engagement like high touches and photo sessions already had minimum contact. So what do you think would be the new approach to still maintaining that fan to artist relationship?
Well, that's a good question. Sarah, you seem to have thoughts.
And here's why I got excited, because I was just talking to my friend this morning who has a fan engagement with someone via telephone. There's an app, and I wish I can remember it, but I can't remember offhand. There's an app that they use where she was able to procure, and I'm not sure if it's through lottery, if she had to pay, a 5-minute conversation with an idol. So I know that I think Monsta X, or there's a few idols that have been doing it, a few groups that have been doing that. So that might be maybe not the new way, but definitely the current way of how fan engagements have been going face to face. I know during the Beyond Live concerts, they've used Zoom to have fans watch the concert, and then a few are picked to ask questions to the group. So there are definitely ways around the physical fan engagement.
Okay. What do you think, Tamar? Do you think that high touch and fan engagements is still something viable?
So I saw some J-pop artists doing it, but for J-pop artists like from the AKB model, that's a little bit more particular because their whole career is, you know, they're performing at certain theaters and fans are coming to them all the time and seeing them in person. So I think that kind of makes more sense. Someone mentioned the K-pop in the chat that we just don't really get a lot of that stuff in like America anyway. So I don't really think that's something that international fans really can like expect, you know, virtual face-to-face meetings between idols. I think Alexa kind of tried that. She dropped a surprise Zoom link, and a lot of artists have done. Charlie has been really successful at that. And like from the get-go, Alexa, there was someone racist in the chat, so in the room. So I think that people are probably not going to really focus on international fan engagement right now beyond, you know, social media generally posting or releasing more content. I don't think there's going to be that one-on-one engagement right now that fans want, but I think there's going to be a lot of content, so maybe we'll be able to make up for it. And I mean, I could be totally wrong. I mean, people are mentioning in the chats that like Eric and Tablo are doing like really amazing things. Someone said that NCT and GOT7 were like doing phone calls and Kakao, and I didn't know about that. But people like Eric and Tablo are just like, yeah, we're stuck inside too, so let's chill, and it's pretty successful. So I think some other artists will do it, but I really don't think. I think right now, especially in Korea, people aren't living the way we are in the US right now. So I don't think that's even going to be the focus. Like, I think in Korea, it's going to be like, how can they do a fan engagement? And they're going to do it in a few like weeks, months. Like, it's going to begin again. And they probably won't do like high touches or something, but they'll probably still do autograph sessions. You know, people are going to restaurants, people are going to cafes, like Annie said. So, you know, as long as they wear a mask and if they stay a few feet apart, they can still do a sign, like an autograph session and stuff. So I think that it's going to reopen pretty soon. And K-pop stars in general, aside from the ones who are very like Anglo-centric, like Eric and Tablo, aren't really going to necessarily, like, I don't know. Sorry, I'm like a buzzkill.
No, you're not a buzzkill at all. It's fine. And Eric's also a Georgia boy. He might have a potluck. Look. You might have a cookout. So what is our next question, if you do not mind?
All right. It looks like radio might play a bigger role in entertainment due to this pandemic. And I'm going to add to that, not just radio, but internet radio as well. Do you think this will help other artists to break on the airwaves like the Spanish market has done in the past?
Annie, you know I'm sending you this question. Do you think that radio and streaming is going to be a good platform for lesser known artists in Korea?
If we get mentioned, this might be a very dumb answer, but yeah, I mean, like I said, it's unless we get chances to, you know, get interviewed or having a conversation, maybe. But other than that, if you know, if I just pick me, it's just not gonna happen, you know.
Got you. What do you think? I'm gonna send it to Albert, and then Uzu. Do you think radio will be able to, particularly, I guess, Korean diaspora artists, you would hear more of them on, you know, live streams and radio and such? Do you think that is something that's going to happen?
You know, I can't really give a totally straight answer on this because, again, it really depends. Because, yes, a lot of people are now stuck at home, but that doesn't necessarily mean people are listening to more music, right? You know, I tend to listen to music like when I'm driving or podcasts when I'm driving. But if you weren't really searching for new music beforehand, it's not always going to be the case that you're going to be looking for right now. But that being said, I just saw Uzu post in the chat, like Spotify playlists are the new A&R, right? I personally don't really listen to the radio anymore, right? MTV like doesn't play music.
Yeah.
But Spotify is where a lot of people will find new artists, and then they'll use social media to connect with them even further. So I think that's going to continue to be important. I think that, like, no matter what, that's sort of where artists and my peers are sort of focused. We weren't even as focused on doing live shows and touring at this point. It's like, especially in the hip hop arena, getting on those playlists and getting recognition and getting those plays will lead to people engaging with you online. And then that's where you really create your fans.
Okay. What's your thoughts on that, Uzu?
Yeah, like I said, like I've discovered a lot of indie artists on Spotify, thanks to the algorithm. I mean, really, it's the algorithm probably that's like ultimate A&R, but also like Netflix and like TV shows, and like with like Apple TV and all these like different streaming video streaming sites having more content they have to create. That's more space for indie artists or, you know, musicians to fill that up, you know. So I could see that kind of like growing. I don't really pay attention to radio at all. Like, I don't even know truthfully, I don't know my radio stations.
Yeah.
You know, the only radio station I listen to is like Zane Lowe, you know, on Beats One Radio. That's it. So, you know, if a Korean artist wants to break into, man, but actually that statement, I've been asked that in Korea. Like I would be in Korea and these Korean, you know, executives would talk to me. They're like, oh, I have this like Korean artist. They want to break into America. Like, you could help me, right? You know, like get him on the radio, get him on this and that. Now, it would just be like such weird conversations and expectations. I don't know what exactly, you know, and maybe Annie could speak into it sometime, but like, I don't know. I just feel like if you want to break into the American market, it has to be, you got to find your niche. At first, I thought it was strange Dean was working with, you know, I thought he would work with like top tier artists that I consider top tier, you know, and I was like, why is he working with certain like very niche artists?
Real low key, yeah.
Yeah, and I think from what I can observe, I have no idea. You know, I think it's because he's trying to establish some sort of niche market in the States, and grow from there. Because, you know, if you're just, I don't know, you can't just be like, I want to go into America. Like, you really have to have a plan, especially if you're a foreign, you know, based artist.
Can I piggyback off that real quick and just speak to that real quick? Like,
Yeah,
because I've noticed like Toby Lou was one of the artists that did a collaboration with
Yep.
with some K-pop artists. The name is escaping me right now.
Jeez.
But like I don't know if this was intentionally the strategy, but I do see the strategy in that, because I think that for the general public, if they listen to a major pop star with like a K-pop artist, they would be like, okay, like this is kind of like a corporate thing, like corporate K-pop, corporate pop. They put this together, right? Maybe they think it's a little bit less genuine. But when you have, I think, a K-pop artist working with somebody that's on the come up, right? I think a lot of kind of indie music fans respect Toby Lou's kind of eccentric nature and the way that he approaches his music. He then, was it Crush or Dean that collaborated with him? Does anyone know?
With Toby Lou?
It was Crush.
It was Crush, right? So then it kind of builds from the ground up. The American fans have this appreciation, like, oh, he's working with Toby Lou, who I see as like an indie artist that kind of gets it. And then as they both kind of become more popular, there's kind of this organic growth that happens. And I don't know if that was the intentional strategy there, but that could be an explanation for why they're attacking kind of these more niche markets. And also, it's probably a lot easier for him to ask an indie artist, and the indie artist would be more receptive to working with him, because now Toby Lou can get fans in Korea that he wouldn't have previously had. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and I think that's why we like this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do we have any other questions, Miss Ashley?
I think we have time for just one more. I find this one personally interesting, so that's why I'm going to ask it. Do you think these new hybrid bands like Kachi, Z Girls, SB19, who have the K-pop sound, but either don't speak Korean or rarely have Korean members, help or hurt the Hallyu Wave?
And you get to answer it as well.
Oh, that's delightful. This is such a westernized US question. I just adore it with every fiber of my being, because we're the only ones who get so bent out of shape about who steps into the scene. I speak Korean and I'm not Korean. I've lived there and I'm not Korean, and I get a greater pass than anybody in Kachi or SB19 would ever get. And that's very interesting to me. We seem to be very selective about it when it's not a person of color, when it's a Chad Future, when it's a whoever the young ladies are, I can't even remember their names. Z Girls and Z Boys are made up of members across the entirety of Asia. And that's something that hasn't been done before. Yes, you see groups that have people from Thailand. You see people with groups that have someone from China, specifically Hong Kong. But to have someone from everywhere, it's very interesting, but we still kind of turn our nose up at it. But then if it's someone who's here and they're Asian American, if they're Chinese American, Korean American, or whatever, we're so excited about the opportunity for them to break in. So it's this interesting prejudice that we create towards Caucasian people making artistry that we're already salivating over because it's so different. I don't think it hurts it. At some point or another, it's going to become something that has a sense of relevancy. And I see somebody said something about don't mention Chad Future because it gets on your nerves.
Oh, poor Chadwick.
But Chad Future didn't have any problems. And instead of it being a thing where we take the notion of, oh, well, you know, this was someone who was misappropriating the opportunity and whatnot. He was a genuine artist just like any other, and he still makes music under a different name. I had the opportunity to interview the young man and ask him the questions that people were harping on him about. Intention goes a long way. And if these artists, these Kachi, these Z girls, these SB19s, and any and everything else, including Rania, when we had a moment of having a multi-ethnic member in that, if we can get to a point of understanding that artists want to expound upon their art. Not everyone wants to be the next Beyonce or Lady Gaga or the next G-Dragon. Not everyone aspires towards that. Then we might be able to get to a point where we can see this as a greater advantage towards Hallyu. Hallyu in itself is just a catch-all phrase for what we have all been inundated with in terms of Korean entertainment, but it doesn't have to limit who can interact in it. And it's a very interesting stance for me to take because earlier on in my whole commentary about all of this, I wouldn't have that mindset. But after being there, after living in different places and being exposed to different attempts on artistry, it's bound to happen. It's going to happen. Unless they take the approach of Japan and don't let anyone in or out, it's bound to happen. And we should begin to anticipate it.
Tamar, do you have thoughts on that?
I have many thoughts on that. I was already on a podcast a few weeks ago where we discussed it, and somebody, I'm as white as you can get, and she's not, and she was saying, we were having a whole conversation about Kachi, and like, honestly, it came down to, we don't really think of them as K-pop because they're just not, you know, on that scale. So something like SB19 might be a better thing to have a conversation about. But she said for her, as a Black woman, she really looked to K-pop originally when she was younger. Like she found it in high school, and she did it like distinctly because she was sick and tired of essentially like white faces on TV and white faces in the music scene. And that's not to say, you know, that there's not a lot of representation of Black people in America, but like she remembers thinking, she said, I still think of K-pop as like the alternative entertainment industry that's, you know, a dominant entertainment industry. We're seeing, you know, Parasite and Korean sports is now broadcasting on ESPN. And she was saying it was really important for her to see another industry other than the one that she's grown up in and felt like ostracized from her entire life growing up, even though, you know, even if she wasn't represented on it. But she remembers thinking like the idea of a British group saying they're K-pop now without any rhyme or reason except that they're, you know, fans, like she found it personally offensive. And that made me kind of think, oh, I understand, because like people are saying like the conversation is that it is going to open up, you know, people are going to, we already have K-pop stars who aren't Korean. The idea of K-pop being distinctly Korean is, you know, always a fluid thing. But for her, hearing her, like how important it was for her, even now in 2020, she said she just didn't like it. And I just thought, if even one person thinks that, then that means to me, I don't want to see people deciding that they're K-pop without being without being part of the industry and growing up through it, because that means that somebody still needs what they're getting from K-pop right now. So I think that there is definitely the room for it. Like you mentioned, Rania, and aside from the way that Alex was treated, like they did pretty well, like attempting to bring her in. You know, she was performing with them. It wasn't just, you know, a one-off song. It was a disaster in some elements and some aspects, but like they tried. And now you have groups like the Z Girls and Z Boys where they're going through the K-pop kind of system and, you know, learning through it. It's, I mean, I think everyone's like, I feel bad because I'm like crapping on Kachi, but like really they just weren't anywhere close to being called a K-pop group. You know, they're at best a K-pop cover group performing an original song. So I feel kind of bad saying that, but like, you know, you need to be like, what the whole thing that everyone talks about K-pop at the base level, like what makes K-pop popular, and is that it's so good and like glossy. And if you're not gonna do that, like there's just, how can you even call yourself K-pop? So I think at the base level you have that, and then there's all the aspects of like it's being an industry and all that. But I think I think that conversation that I had was just really, it was so interesting for me to hear. Oh, Albert.
The hardest roast.
I loved it. I'm gonna use that.
Yo, that was awesome.
I feel really bad for them. But like, we were just, yeah, I mean, I thought it was, I really appreciated the conversation we had, but I don't know. I think that, there's a time for everything, but maybe not right now.
I know I'm not on the panel, but when it comes to the notion of a white person or white persons doing K-pop, and I've said this to people, what makes K-pop really is different than pop music in general, how people think of it, is the K part, the Korean aspect of people who are Korean making pop music. And for me, seeing someone sort of whitewash it, it just reminds me of minstrelsy. And I know that's not fair in a lot of ways, but it just, especially if they have no actual real concept of the culture, the language. See, if you hear my cat, it's about that time that he wants attention to be paid to him. But it just sort of brings to mind that whole aspect of this white person has given themselves permission to dom this culture, either as a joke, either as a social experiment, or because they feel like they should be allowed in that space. And so I can sort of see where the lady you were talking to sort of just has a weird feeling about it, because that's how I feel about it. And I was with Ashley in Korea. We went to a, not a temple, but a palace. And I see white people in hanbok, and completely gut reaction. I was like, what is happening? Like, that was just gut reaction, because my understanding of it is it's costuming for them, and that's not fair, but it's a gut reaction. So getting back to someone who's on the panel and not me, Sarah, your thoughts on the multicultural, quote unquote, K-pop groups?
It's going to happen. It has been happening, and it will continue to happen. With Tati specifically, one thing, because I don't follow them, it's kind of hard not to know the name, at least because they are on the lips of practically every fan, majority of it being bad. But do they have any Korean members, or this is zero Korean member group?
Okay, so it's even worse because they had one Korean member and then she left, and then they brought in another Korean member, and it felt very tokeny.
Okay, so here's my thing, and I don't know if this is advocate, because I noticed how much hate they're getting, and I'm wondering if they're calling themselves a K-pop group because they know the reaction that fans will have. What I read was that they had huge, I don't want to say success, but number-wise, huge numbers when they debuted their MV. I know it was over 1 million within the first 3 days. So I hear, all press is good press, whether it's good, bad, whatever. People have been talking about them constantly. So I don't know if maybe they're using this as a gimmick, which is not, I'm hoping it's not, but I'm kind of cynical, thinking they're just doing whatever to get out there, because I have seen some fans, and then I saw in the comments, DK TV interviewed them recently. So they're getting love calls, if you will, from people who want to know their story, why they want to do this. I don't want to say I don't like them because I'm trying to be positive, but I've heard their song. It wasn't great. I'm hoping that maybe somebody will come along, an international group that will do what needs to be done, do the training, learn the language, and just maybe debut and show that there can be. But it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because if they come out saying, hey, we're the next K-pop group, and we don't have any Asian members, Korean members specifically, like you said, the K in K-pop is Korean. So I don't know. I know I'm babbling. I'm sorry, it's late. But I just feel with Kathy specifically, it's kind of a gimmick. I'm just going to say that. I just think they're a gimmick. And as far as other international groups, like the other ones that you have mentioned, they seem to at least have a higher quality. They're trying to do the way that other groups do as far as training and whatnot. So yes, I don't think they're authentic. I'm sorry.
I mean, we got actual, you know, people who can speak from the perspective of us not being the Westerners in this, who have not a sliver of Korean going through our blood veins. So, you know, I would be really interested to hear what the artists have to say about it. Like, I didn't mean to step over you, but I've always been interested because I'm almost always put in the position of conversations that either are spot on or parallel with the misappropriation and cultural things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finally a relief to be able to hear what someone else might be thinking.
Okay, so what do you guys think about it, Annie, Albert, or Uzi, or all three, about multicultural K-pop groups?
I honestly don't really know much about multicultural K-pop groups, but I think just in general, the whole possible misappropriation of culture, whether it be within K-pop, whether it be within American hip-hop, you know, so I know we've had these conversations a lot over the phone, but as an Asian that is primarily in hip-hop, which is quote unquote, you know, for me, a borrowed culture. It's not something that my culture created, and it's something that I'm a guest in. And that I put my own spin on. And, you know, you were mentioning like white people in Hamburg, right? I think that it's important not to generalize that those people are immediately misappropriating, right? Mm-hmm. There's always that knee-jerk reaction, which I totally understand happens, but you kind of have to assess whether there's conviction in it, whether they're being genuine, whether there's an actual genuine desire to understand the culture, or again, whether it's costuming. And unfortunately, like, you can never you can't blanket that and generalize with everyone, like, oh, everyone means well or everyone doesn't mean well. But that's why it's important to kind of get to know things on an individual basis. And I think that's something that's very difficult for the world as a whole, because people are lazy, right? But it takes getting over that initial knee-jerk reaction. And so, I don't know, I feel like I heard from a lot of the journalists, like, you know, K-pop, I mean, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but it seems like sometimes K-pop should be purely K-pop, right? I don't think anyone was saying that, but that's sort of the vibe that I got from some people. And people are saying it in the chat, like, K-pop takes a lot from other genres as well, right? It takes a lot from other cultures as well. K-pop does a lot to sell. And I think the sooner we realize that music in general is a lot of like taking from other cultures, assimilating other cultures, putting your own spin on it. It's been like that since the beginning of time, right? Great artists steal. The more we can kind of get past that and then just look at the intention of it, right? Are they respecting the culture? Are they doing it just for their own gain, right? Are they putting their own spin with it? And people are going to respect that, and some people are not going to like it. And that's just kind of how it is. Art is subjective to a very high degree. So, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Annie?
I mean, like, it's inevitable to have other multicultural K-pop bands, but I think, you know, in general, like, for me, like, when the first, like, K-pop, like, boy band thing happened in Korea, I thought it was, like, essentially Backstreet Boys in like, with Korean, like, good-looking Korean boys. But the only difference that K-pop is doing compared to those early 2000s is, like, the internet. The only difference is the internet, and it's essentially the same thing. They're borrowing all the pop elements and bringing all these pretty girls and guys to like dance in synchronization, and like, I don't think it's like, it's just solely for our Korean, it's just for the Korean people. I think it's like multicultural K-pop groups can always happen, and maybe they can be good, you know, you never know that. So, I mean, it's very odd to say things about this, because our music is categorized as K-pop as well on iTunes and stuff like that, because that generates more traction on algorithmically. So for us to reach more audience, it's the way to go. Even though we don't, like, write K-pop songs, we don't write, I mean, we don't write Korean lyrics that often, but we're somehow summed in K-pop category in the streaming world. So I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Izu, really quick, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. I feel like I talk too much. I actually have no problem with multicultural like K-pop bands, but for me, my question is like, why label it K-pop? If you can agree that there's a K-pop sound, then fine, call it K-pop, you know, but why not just call yourself a rock band or a pop band? Like, you know, I don't really, you know, it's bizarre. It's a whole, like, that's what I'm curious about for people who want to create a K-pop band, you know, label it K-pop and also be extremely multicultural, but then keep it Korean centric. Like, I don't understand that. Just call yourself a pop band.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was a very interesting and enlightening conversation. I'm glad that all of my homies came together and decided to do this with and for me, because y'all know I don't know shit about shit. So I just want to take this time to thank all of you guys for participating, and especially all the people who came and asked questions, interacted in the comments, and for DJ for being the goodest boy ever. Thank you for coming, and thank you all. Check out all of their things, check out all of their social media. And yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. I really appreciate you guys for coming. And sorry for taking up so much of your time. Thanks, you all. Sai. Yeah. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thanks, Sai. Thank you, everyone.